hear that, Maxfield?
Oh, it went out.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because I connected. It was horrible quality.
There we go.
We're back.
Hey, Seth, Jim, and Bruce, you guys are muted.
Is that better? Apparently, when the system goes out, it mutes us at the same time. This has happened twice so far this evening, so well, I guess we'll just have to keep watching it. So our one dwelling unit per 2 acres is now going to be a minimum of 2 dwelling units per 2 acres.
Yes, yes.
2 dwelling units or a duplex?
So,
well, that's the point. Yeah.
you could, so single, if you have, good question, let's.
Because it all have to be in one build.
If the two, so, single family home on 2 acres means duplex 2, you also have to allow a duplex 2 units on the same 2 acres.
Right.
Once you get to multifamily, like 3 or more, you could say, go back to your current provision of, you know, for a 3 unit, you need 3 acres, or you could say multifamily is the same way, like 2 units, 2 acres. That what you're required to do, because in areas that are not served by both water and wastewater, is the duplex thing.
Right, and the duplex has to be all in one building. It cannot be 2 separate buildings.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's just, you know, a matter of going through.
So we don't allow duplexes already everywhere. Then single families are allowed.
You do.
That's not the.
Exactly.
Yes. The
That's
dwelling units per acre.
It's the dwelling units per acre.
Okay.
That needs to be tweaked.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's that. In terms of the time to draft, that won't take too much time, but will mean, you know, a change in what's allowed in certain areas. I did add a note at the bottom that, you know, septic capacity for 2 units will still be needed.
And
water, septic water, and for areas in the floodplain regulations, will still need to meet the floodplain regulations. So I don't think this will mean that every house in Wolcott becomes a duplex, but for people who have, you know, septic capacity, enough water, can comply with other rules like flood hazard regulations, it provides enough, you know, opportunity. But some people have said, does this mean we're doubling density in every back road? And it probably doesn't. Basically, septically, it could, but you're allowed under zoning, but what's practically can actually happen. Are there questions about that? Because Jim's question gets to the next line. So accessory apartments, accessory dwelling units, similarly, the regulations and review process cannot be more restrictive for accessory units than single family homes. So different from a duplex, an accessory apartment can be in a structure separate from the single family home. So in this case, what this means is that as long as one of the units is owner occupied, someone could have, you know, a house and then a separate apartment on a standalone structure, and barn or garage that's a freestanding structure with an apartment above. What you're not allowed to do anymore, which you did, the 800 square feet and the number of bedrooms.
So somebody could have their one building could be larger, the buildings could be the same size.
Okay. So that's another change. Same caveat about wastewater, water, floodplain, but
Right, and it's still just like the original accessory unit thing was. Dwelling units per 2 acres.
Yeah.
It becomes 2 dwelling units per 2 acres.
exactly.
If the lot were 2 acres.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So those are probably the two most significant changes. They're simple. Yeah, I don't think, like I said, these won't take too long to do the drafting off really. So next item is emergency shelters, which under the Home Act, similar to how the bylaws have to regulate state or community owned and operated institutions, meaning they have to be allowed and you can have site plan review, but you can't restrict hours and other items. For example, emergency shelters need to be treated the same way. Section 5.6 is where we would need to work on that.
So by emergency shelters, we're referring to homeless type shelters.
Yes.
Like environmental emergency.
That is correct. The language, it uses the phrase emergency shelter, but in it's really clear that I mean like the homeless emergency shelter, not like flood, natural disaster, temporary shelter. So the next item, review process and appeals. There are provisions about what that process needs to look like, and I didn't outline all of them because I think when we go through those sections, it will be more clear. But we'll have to spend some time in the review section of both conditional use site plan review as well as subdivision and your appeals process. These become more relevant to when there are appeals of DRB decisions, and I'm not sure how frequent that is in Wolcott, but all communities have to have those set up. The next one is one of the few discretionary pieces, which is the Home Act allows towns to enable administrative approval of minor subdivisions. Previously, all subdivisions, even a one-lot subdivision, regardless of municipal capacity or location, needed to go through a development review board process. The Home Act enables towns, but doesn't require. This is one of the things that's not required.
This is not limiting us to that. Right? I mean, if we wanted to make administrative review up to 6 lots, that's prerogative.
Yeah, the statute does not define what they mean by minor. It just says minor. I did 1 or 2 based on your existing bylaws of what you think of minor, but you could go up to 6 and say ZA could do that. That is, something that the planning commission, could spend time discussing. If you think that would be a good option for the town, it certainly can expedite the process.
Yeah. I mean, most of these subdivisions that we have, we just come down here and follow the regulations that are written down there. There's no reason why somebody behind the desk can't do the same.
Yeah. And if you do that, there's still an appeal and notice, or the zoning administrator.
Well, the first appeal would be to the DRB.
Yeah, so it would be kind of like an appeal. It's almost like a request for a hearing to the DRB. Yeah. So I can explore some options, or do other people have any thoughts on that, or do you want time to absorb?
Well, we're probably going to go through that. Right?
We will. We'll look at what that one looks like.
A more detailed discussion at that point, I think.
Yeah.
Because probably not everybody is of the exact same mind on that.
Yeah.
As far as how far it should go.
Mhm. Yeah, and we can put aside some time to talk that through and what it would look like and what the threshold would be and all of that.
Seth, would that require select board approval? Because it would obviously increase the amount of time the ZA would be spending in the office compared to what he's doing right now.
Yeah, so actually really good question. And I'll address that question as well as the bigger question of adoption. So one of the significant changes for the select board to the Home Act is that the adoption by Australian ballot is no longer required. So select board will be the body voting on the amendments. When they do that vote, I think deliberating on the ZA capacity is, would be a legitimate point for them to discuss. It might make sense to bring them into the discussion of administrative review so they're not surprised at the hearing process on that.
So back up a minute, why did that go back to the select board? Because we've been approving these for the last 15 years by Australian ballot.
That was a change made by the legislature made. They can do that. There is still a process. So the option for the voters to petition for a vote on an individual bylaw is still out there. So I think there are some towns where the planning commission is actually the body saying, like, we still want votes, so please sign the petition to have one. Even though they wrote it, right, as sort of, but it's no longer that it's not automatic now. It's if there's a petition. And very few of these things did they ask my opinion on. So I think the rationale is that some amendments are small, some are big, and the petition process lets people kind of decide what smaller things be done. Counterpoint to that, of course, is that small things can add up to big things, right? And yeah. So I'll get some examples of that, plan to have some select board discussions, spend some time talking about what appropriate thresholds are for Wolcott, and that can be a point we spend some additional time on.
And we could make our recommendations. They can change them, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. They can make recommendations.
It wouldn't be the first time they do such a thing.
Right. It's the push pull that the select board and planning commission do. Yep. So parking, this is one of those areas where Wolcott already does a lot of what the Home Act now requires, which is allowing more flexibility to meet parking requirements with shared enough site spaces. There are also some changes to how much parking can be required for multifamily uses. And that is dependent on a variety of factors. So I just need to, the reason I noted parking table will need to be reviewed is just because they think I'm going to need to spend a little time just looking at your table compared to the Home Act. Wolcott, I think, reflective of the fact that it is a rural community, treats, instead of is it multifamily differently, it treats like is it a 1-2 bedroom versus bigger differently, because
does this Home Act take into account, a place like Wolcott is opposed to a place like Morrisville where everything is walkable and next to nothing is walkable?
there is a differentiation. I think it is a differentiation based on how far you are from like fixed route transit.
Okay.
Yeah. But there is a cap on what you can require. I don't think you're in excess of that cap. I just want to make sure to spend some time on that. But that's that question of, you need to be able to drive through the grocery store and pharmacy in Wolcott, where in Morrisville you can we can walk right into a different environment setting. Next page, PUD density bonus. In a planning and development, the Home Act requires municipalities to provide a density bonus for affordable housing of at least 40%. Wolcott already has a bonus for affordable housing of 50%, so greater than that. And you also have other options that stack on that for other things. So there's no changes needed there. I just wanted to highlight those things where you're doing things that exceed what the Home Act requires. The last bullet point related to the Home Act is just reiterating that statement about water and wastewater, because there will be some differences in what Wolcott is doing and what some of the neighboring communities are doing. Before I jump into the other potential amendments, are there any questions folks have about what we just went over? This will not be the only time you see it. The next step will be seeing it in your text. So if you think of things between now and next time, that's totally okay. So in the other potential amendments, I've only outlined two things. The first is Wolcott currently has a requirement for basic stormwater management when an application creates more half an acre or more of impervious surface. Back when you adopted the bylaws, the threshold for a formal state permit was 1 acre. They've reduced that to half an acre. So the need for the town to kind of capture the gap is a lot less. So you may not need those requirements. Your bylaws also exempt anyone who needs a state permit from needing to meet your local permit or your local standards, and anyone who triggers that threshold is now getting a state permit anyway. So again, an area where Wolcott was ahead of the state on that. Then the next item, which is actually going to be a lot more items, but has a little small box here, flood hazard regulations. You have current regulations, which are structured as an overlay that are from the early 2000s. There have been a lot of changes in FEMA requirements, best practices, experience since then. There's some options for the Planning Commission to consider. And if rumor holds true, FEMA is in the final stages of releasing new NFIP maps. So I'd anticipate some time reviewing updates to that. And we'll be very clear when we go through those what is required by state or federal law and what are above code options or other options for the community to consider. I also left room on this page for other local priorities. So if folks have thoughts on other items we should be thinking about in this update, I'm happy to jot down some notes.
I would like us to look into dropping some of our plat review requirements for smaller subdivisions. Like sometimes people will come in here, most of the subdivisions we've been doing lately are 1 or 2 lots, maybe 3. And, when they're looking at having to show where all the power lines are, all ponds and all, fire hydrants, and some of these subdivisions do not have any of that. You're not going to have a fire pond for a one lot subdivision or something like that. Yeah, I would just like us to have that discussion, how we make those simpler. It's like, it kind of seems like we're putting everybody through an Act 250 review, essentially.
Okay, we can spend some time on that. it could be some discussions with the DRB about what do you actually need to see versus what is sort of extraneous information.
Yeah.
So, can would we add, maybe look at our access to lots and our frontage requirements and make them a little easier for people who don't see stuff very often to understand what is required of them?
Mhm. That's been a perennial issue, I think, the frontage and access rules.
People have a hard time understanding our lot shape, lot size. To me, it's fairly simple, but multiple times. People are coming in and like,
Okay, well, it's always fun to listen to it.
I know Michael Hardy, who's not here this evening, kind of wanted to look at that too, so.
Okay,
But yeah, maybe trying to make that a little simpler.
okay. Got it. So those two kind of simplify those two things.
Can we have a simpler version? No, I mean, you can't replace the zoning ordinances, but is there room for some simpler version that is accurate, but is easier to make your way through or something? I mean, this is an enormous document.
Mhm.
Either we find a way to let people search through it easily, or yes, an executive summary certainly doesn't do it, but does anybody do a simpler version of their existing regulations or some other format for the thing, whether it be God knows what, audio, video, spreadsheet, you name it, but that's it. We just have one ordinance.
Just-
Big and fat. Yeah.
I like the idea, Bruce. Maybe it's just like a checklist. If you're doing a 2-lot decision, here's like the 10 or 12 or whatever things that you need to have. Check, check.
Yeah. I think that, you know, the challenge that people face is, you know, most people are coming into the zoning office to like build a shed or a deck. And rules for a shed or a deck, really, you get a permit and you meet the setbacks, but you get this document. And in, you know, a community with a full-time zoning staff, somebody, you know, you see this document, you sit down with a zoning administrator and they say, this is all you need to do. In a smaller town, someone has to figure that out themselves. So, you know, checklists or to-do lists or things.
The really simple way would be let somebody chat against it.
Mhm.
And that's trivial to do. I'm not sure of the regulations about that.
Mhm.
I mean, anybody can take that zoning thing and chat against it every which way, and it doesn't give any wrong answers. It will point you to the place in the document that it's referring to.
Mhm.
So, you know, does any town do it? Is it reasonable to try it? Whatever.
Mhm. I think that's definitely something we can spend some time on, thinking about ways to make it more accessible for, you know, a landowner or small builder.
Yeah, even our zoning administrator doesn't have the capability
Mhm.
of finding things in that document, or all of the things in that document.
Are there particular like key things that have been issues understanding or have come up of specific things that people seem to be confused by or have trouble with?
You know, mostly road frontage,
Mhm.
public or private road,
Yeah.
what constitutes a road?
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah,
that-
roads, driveways, right of ways, what the difference is, where they overlap.
Right. I think that's an area where maybe we could, yeah, we could spend some time, you know, seeing if there's ways to make that clearer for folks. other items?
Jim's a well-worn version of it there.
So early on in my time on the DRB, nearly as long as I've been on the planning commission, one of the first subdivisions that I was involved in, and I came in late in the process, and they'd already had a couple of meetings on it. This guy, he had a 50-foot right of way.
Mm-hmm.
But his road wasn't actually all on that 50-foot right of way.
Okay.
And I don't know, do we really need to spell out that the road? I mean, when I brought that up, he literally was almost ready to blow up, and threatened to sue us. And it's like, okay, this is like my first couple minutes of them.
Right. So. Yeah. The road is the road via the frontage.
It hasn't been a problem since, and this was 6 or 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
People won't do that. The issue was that he had a driveway going in. It was right on the edge of his property.
Mm.
And he wanted to call that driveway his road. And actually that the right of way would actually be onto his neighbor's property. But actually the driveway was right on the edge.
Mm-hmm.
And I think his neighbor might have had access to that too. But he didn't want to go through the business of getting an easement from him.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we haven't seen anything like that since.
Okay. But it was an issue that came up.
It was an issue in that instance. Yeah.
Okay. I'll put a mark on that. Spend some time looking at that.
Yeah, other than that, there's on that 2-acre road, regularly shaped lot along the roadside. A regularly shaped lot also has these angles that are delineated.
Mhm.
People have a hard time with that one.
Okay.
I don't know how we simplify that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it seems like if
I
you.
was gonna say same thing, Jim. If there was some, calculation tool that people could have access to. I mean, I know the surveyors generally do, but sometimes surveyors aren't there, or it has been a confusion point in the past.
Michael actually has some kind of an app on his computer, so he's kind of been reviewing some of these lots when they come in, but that's kind of late in the game for the person who's trying to subdivide, although most of those people are using a surveyor, they should be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how, do they really read this? Or are they just saying 150 foot wide and 2 acres? And that's good.
A lot of them, I think, look at a very basic frontage, lot size.
Well, the thing is, if you take that 2-acre lot, say it's going to be long and narrow,
Mm-hmm.
and you tilt it too much, it's going to shrink down in width, and you're not going to get that in 600 feet,
Right.
or 4 times the
Mhm.
width. So, but to me, it's kind of simple, but some people do have some troubles with it.
Mm-hmm.
There should be a way of defining it. It's not ambiguous. It could be defined. It is defined.
It is defined, but it requires some math, it requires showing up with a protractor or, a computer program.
Yeah.
We're not really set up here to do that.
Right. You're not doing geometry in the DRB meetings.
So the surveyor should do it. It's just for us to check it, to make sure the surveyor did it right.
Maybe in the bylaws, it should, as part of that 2-acre lot, it should require that the surveyor prove that that is a 2-acre lot.
Yeah.
There's any question.
Show us
Yeah.
how it worked out. Sure.
a sketch or something.
Yeah. Okay, I can work on that.
And some of them do, you know, that guy, the surveyor Mutrix, I think up in Craftsburg. My neighbors were subdividing and creating, you know, kind of narrow lots, couple narrow lots out of a 10-acre lot. And he actually, you know, had the math there,
Mhm.
you know, that he showed that a regularly shaped 2-acre lot would fit in that section. So,
Okay, I'll mark that as something we need to work on.
good, good. Anything else that you've run into in your years of doing this, Maxfield, that we should be addressing or thinking of addressing?
I mean, I think we kind of hit the highlights there. If something comes up, Seth, I'll reach out.
Right. Great. And just on a note on timing, you know, I'll pick these up, I'll flag some things in this. I likely won't be, well, it's possible I'll be here at the May meeting, but probably not the June and July meeting, because I'll be on paternity leave starting on May 22nd or earlier if baby decides to come earlier. But then I will be back.
So are you the zoning and subdivision guy in the office? You don't have one of your minions that's like.
Megan or Melissa may help put things together. Just have to make sure there's a lot of things that are, you know, being distributed for that period of time. But Megan or Melissa may fill in for that piece. You won't see me for a little bit.
Okay.
Yep.
But possibly in May.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
What's the time frame where we have to do it? Is there a,
There's still time frame.
just whenever we get it done and get it approved?
Yep. The municipal planning grant is, you know, available for a year, so we can do the work.
So what is the time frame for these mandatory things?
So the way their law was written was very different than how they've done this in the past, which is they went into effect in July 1 of 2023. How a zoning administrator is supposed to administer them, though, given the zoning administrator's job is to administer the bylaws as written, but then there's statute that is different, right? I don't think it's been tested what happens if someone comes in with something that's, you know, required to be allowed that the bylaws haven't caught up with yet.
Right, so that person would have to know
They would need
the
to.
law was.
Yeah.
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 And for me, I went through that stuff and just said, here, Tom, this is what the home act says, and you have to do this, and you can't just hunt it to the DRB, or you're able to decide it yourself. And if not, then it can be appealed to the DRB or whatever, but
Yeah.
it was just a case of taking that information to.
Yes. That would be likely how that would play out. But catching up with them avoids that confusion. It also means that people who aren't spending, you know, like me, always looking at the statute aren't disadvantaged because they don't know something. Right.
It was on your website, that's
Right.
where I first spotted it, you had it prominently displayed
We've tried to
on your website for a while.
Yeah.
Many years.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, again, you know, in a way, the Home Act is in effect, so there's not a penalty if you need more time to do the other items and spend some time with them thoughtfully too. Yeah.
But if somebody were knowledgeable and they wanted to have a duplex on their 2 acres,
Yeah.
right now, they could force that issue.
They could, yeah.
Doesn't seem to be a really happening thing in Wolcott. I don't know how many accessory apartments or accessory buildings we've approved. I know of one that came before the DRB because Tom didn't really quite understand what was going on. And I saw her later and she didn't follow through with the project, I think, because of the septic regulations.
Yeah.
Is there, what are the septic rules in terms of accessory unit? Because when I was thinking about putting the tiny house down and using, well, before the house was here that I built, of letting it go into the existing septic system, and the rules won't allow that. There's a distance associated with that, but maybe not the regulars.
So for I think the challenge for a rural community with accessory dwelling units is that it's not a one-to-one conversion for bedrooms. So say you have a 4-bedroom house and a septic system that is permitted for 4 bedrooms. You can't simply, under state rules, and this is a state rule, not a zoning rule, you can't convert, say, oh, I'm giving up a bedroom in the house. So now it's a 3-bedroom house and it's a 1-bedroom accessory dwelling unit because it resets. So there's a
first bedroom has 2.
Exactly.
So every bedroom afterward is 1.
Exactly.
Calculate.
Yeah.
So you really, if you go to that first bedroom in the accessory dwelling needs a septic for 2 people, where the additional bedroom in the house only needed 1 for 1. And so,
So it's like 100, well, yeah, it's like 150 gallons for the first bedroom and I don't know, 75 or whatever for each one.
that's it. Yep.
Okay.
So that means if you don't have space or you don't have the resources to upgrade your septic system, the accessory dwelling unit is viable.
So as far as putting your tiny house over there, that's an accessory dwelling unit. It's a single bedroom. And even though it's, it might be tough for 2 people to live in that. Yeah, that's still the way they count it.
That's
Oh, that's one.
It's
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Okay. Great.
So is that it for this evening?
That's it for
All
this
right.
evening.
Yeah,
So unless you guys have something more, we'll call this meeting then.
give you back some minutes to your time.
Yes.
Okay. Is that safe?
Nope, so far.
Oh, cool.
Tonight, well, it's 20s, but tomorrow's only gonna be at 20s too.
That White House down beside the town hall, you have to keep, the pipe goes through it, maybe you know this,